what makes Jesus different is that after he died, in and of himself, of his own power, he was resurrected. He came alive again. And that is what our whole faith in Christianity is dependent upon. Without the resurrection, nothing else really matters. Jesus is just another man who said good things and died, and maybe was a prophet from God and taught us some good stuff. Like Elijah was a prophet from God, performed all kinds of miracles in his lifetime. But we don't go to Elijah to save our souls, right? We just learn from him and learn from his experiences. Sure. What changes with Jesus because of his resurrection is evidence of him being God and saying everything that he said of him claiming to be God is actually true. And so we can now put our faith in him and our trust in him that he can actually have the ability to forgive our sins and to save our souls for eternity.
We believe that you are strong by design, and you were made in God's image to have a strong body, mind, and spirit. You're listening to the #1 Strength and Health Authority podcast in the world. So let's get ready to unlock your potential and transform your life in today's episode.
Hey, welcome to the Strong by Design podcast. My name's Mike Westerdal. I'm your host, and I'm accompanied by Mr. Jared Haley.
Hello.
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 And Jared is one of our podcast hosts. He's also video production specialist, and we've also called you the team chaplain at times.
Yes. You've called me lots of names.
Well, we have called you a lot of
things. That's the nice one, though.
That's true. But you're perfect host/guest for this episode with some of your background and schooling that you've had. So what's your proper introduction? How do you usually introduce yourself when you're a guest or host?
I think I just say my name.
Say, hey, I'm Jared.
Yeah. I'm usually passing the
low key.
The accolades onto the guest. So
okay. Well, I'm trying to pass the accolades on, but I don't have your resume printed out right now.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, today we're going to talk about, the episode title is Liar, Lunatic, or Lord.
Yes.
That's true.
Because Easter's coming.
Easter is coming. If you're listening to this the day it releases, it's tomorrow. If you're listening to it on Easter, happy Easter.
It's today.
It is today.
Yeah, congratulations.
Or maybe it was yesterday.
We just time traveled. Good job.
Exactly. So where did this phrase come from, liar, lunatic, or Lord?
Yeah, liar, lunatic, or Lord. It's been around for a long time, and it's really pertaining to the person of Jesus. And so when we get into Easter, when we get into Jesus' life, we get into the resurrection, and basically saying, is Jesus who he said he was? And when we look at the person of Jesus, really there's three possible outcomes. Either he is a liar, and we can disregard everything that he said, or he believed what he said, in which case he's a lunatic, he's crazy, all of his followers were crazy, or the final conclusion, which is where we would rest, is he is who he says he is. He is Lord.
And who
he
he
is
said
Savior.
he was he said that he was God.
He is God, yes.
Which at the time was really something crazy for someone to say, to claim that they were God.
Yes.
Someone that could...
Well, could you imagine?
Forgiving, it's common, you tread on me, I'll forgive you, right? But could you imagine me saying, I forgive you, Jared, for what you did to someone else?
Right.
Like, I'm the final judge.
Yeah. Once you put yourself into that place, I think it's pretty easy to go, I don't know if I would have reacted well to that as either, within the context of that. So, obviously the disciples and lots of people were different, but I can only imagine how difficult
who
a belief that would be.
He said that he was God.
Correct. Yes.
So really can only go two ways. That's either true. So if he is God, then he was fully man, fully God, and he's the Lord. Or false. If he's not God, then these things that he did, these things that he said, he's either lying about it or he's crazy.
Right.
But how can you hear this a lot of times, people, where you say, do you believe in Jesus? It's historically agreed upon that he was a man that lived, that he was baptized, and even that he was crucified.
Yes.
Like historians agree that this is historically
secular
accurate
scholars.
fact. Right.
Yeah.
like everybody agrees upon that. And then you've got people that say, well, he was a great teacher. There's definitely things from the Bible, things that he taught, stories, parables, lessons that, I apply to my life. But, I don't know if he was actually God.
Right.
Just maybe a prophecy or a teacher.
A good person.
Someone to
nice
kind of, someone to model.
Sure.
But this argument kind of says, how can you just take pieces?
Right.
Because it's one of those three. How could it not be one of those three?
Well, and it's interesting to me because I think when people look at Jesus, if they go that route of, oh, well, he had some good things to say, well, then he's a madman. He's crazy. I mean, if you don't, either he's a liar or he's crazy. And so if you take someone in our context today, if someone is a liar or crazy, you're not going to be like, but at least he had some good things to say. So I'm going to take the good thing. We just don't do that with people. Either you say, hey, they're doing their best and they have really good things to say, I'm going to follow them. Or you go, that person's crazy and I'm just going to throw everything that they said out because I can't believe anything that he said. If he's a liar or if he's crazy, I'm not going to follow you. I'm not going to believe any of the lessons that you teach me.
Right. Or pick and choose kind of what you want from there. Mm-hmm. But that kind of segues into the next question, which is the resurrection. Because in religion and, the meaning of life and happiness, all where your soul goes, the afterlife, all these kind of eternal questions of man. There's a lot of different religions and a lot of people are seeking they kind of know there's a creator, there's a God, but I don't know if Jesus is the only path.
Right.
So some people think that, and then that's where we kind of point to the resurrection. Why does the resurrection matter? Why is it important to decide if it happened or not?
Right. Well, the resurrection and Jesus overcoming death is really what separates him from the pack, right? I mean, because there's been a lot of really good people with, incredible life lessons and things to teach us throughout all of history, right? And you can see that through different religions. You can see that through different philosophers, all kinds of good things that are out there. But what makes Jesus different is that after he died, in and of himself, of his own power, he was resurrected. He came alive again. And that is what our whole faith in Christianity is dependent upon. Without the resurrection, nothing else really matters. Jesus is just another man who said good things and died, and maybe was a prophet from God and taught us some good stuff. Like Elijah was a prophet from God, performed all kinds of miracles in his lifetime. But we don't go to Elijah to save our souls, right? We just learn from him and learn from his experiences. Sure. What changes with Jesus because of his resurrection is evidence of him being God and saying everything that he said of him claiming to be God is actually true. And so we can now put our faith in him and our trust in him that he can actually have the ability to forgive our sins and to save our souls for eternity.
And that's a great explanation. And without the resurrection, then what faith is there? Like
right.
you could go out and kind of mishmash and put together whatever you wanted from
right.
every religion, just take
right.
take the pieces you wanted. But then to say, well, I like some of the things he said, but I don't necessarily agree with this part or not that part. I always point back to the resurrection. You got to really dig into this, look at it, decide for yourself. Do you think it's likely that it happened? Not very likely. Is it more likely that this is a story or something else happened? But if that is true, then he is God. And now you have to, doesn't really matter if you like it or don't like it.
Right.
You still got to believe what he said.
We always tell our kids, so if they get in trouble for something and they'll use the excuse, well, I didn't know, right? Well, I didn't know that was the rule. And I say, if I'm driving down the road and I'm in the speed limit's 30 and I'm driving 60 and I get pulled over by the policeman, the police guy isn't going to tell him, if I say, well, I didn't know that was the speed limit, he's going to say, sorry, you didn't know. Here's your ticket. You know what I mean? He doesn't care the law doesn't care if you know or don't know. It's still the law. And so that's true with God as well. We can claim we didn't know, but you're still held accountable to that law. And so that's where Jesus comes in, is that freedom that he took on the punishment, the consequence of breaking the law for us, and so that's why the resurrection is so important.
And for the other faiths or religions that don't believe that he did resurrect or that he rose from the dead or conquered death, then for them he's just a prophet or a teacher,
right?
Which we kind of talked about. Really doesn't even really make sense because he'd be a liar, a lunatic, or Lord,
right?
But digging into the actual resurrection, there's some common, I guess we'd call them objections, arguments of like if I was trying to get an explanation of things that could have happened, like how do we know? Because that's not a historically secular fact. You know, the Bible says it happened, and for people that aren't sure and they're trying to figure it out, there's some things to kind of. I'm playing devil's advocate, literally kind of devil's advocate by playing the devil's role of trying to shake your faith here and trying to get some explanations. But
I'll do my best.
All right, the first one we've heard people talk because after he rose from the dead, he appeared to the disciples. Disciples, for anyone listening, were followers of Jesus, and they're saying that it wasn't him. It wasn't like his actual alive body, that it was a ghost, a spirit, a soul, something in that form that they saw that wasn't like a real person.
And so, I mean, there's a couple of ways that we can go about this. One is, I mean, if you look at the accounts in the Bible, you know, they're not just able to see him, but they're actually able to touch him. And Thomas is the best example where Thomas didn't believe, right? Thomas, even when Jesus came into the room, he was like, no way, I saw Jesus die. I know that's not Jesus. And he's like, the only way for me to believe that that's who you are is I need to be able to, you know, touch your wrists and feel, the wounds that you encountered. And so Jesus was able to go to him and he was actually able to touch him, which shows that he still had, he had his actual body, and that was physically present. I
think he showed him like the scar where he got stabbed in the side.
Yep, and the holes in his hands.
Yeah.
Where and his feet. Where he was.
And he ate with the disciples too.
He did. Yeah, so I mean, that just shows that he wasn't a spirit, that he was physically present in the room with them.
And if it was a spirit, wouldn't the body still be located in the tomb as well?
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Right.
That's a good point. I actually hadn't thought about that, but absolutely, yeah. If it was just a spirit, then what's the point of the whole scene at the tomb?
They're saying it was a physical body, is what the disciples were saying. It wasn't just like a ghost or a spirit.
But that's a good point, that the physical body was no longer at the tomb, right? And when we look at the Roman soldiers at that time, like there were guards at the tomb, and their job was to protect the tomb. And if they didn't do their job, they were going to go to prison or be killed themselves for not upholding their responsibilities. And I don't know if you've seen The Chosen at all, but they really depict that really well, that the Romans were very strict, especially with the army, of following orders and doing what you needed to do. And if you didn't do that, there are major repercussions for not following
the
falling
tomb
in line.
where Jesus was buried had a giant boulder or rock in front of it.
Yes.
And I believe 2 Roman soldiers guarding it with their life, meaning if something happens, they're going to be executed.
Right.
So it's very serious, armed like professional soldiers with a giant stone in front of it.
Right.
And then the body is gone.
Right. Yeah.
So then where could the body have gone? People have different theories on what could have happened to the body. And some people say, okay, the disciples who were the followers of Jesus, could they have stolen the body or gotten rid of the body or did something to kind of back up this claim that he resurrected? So the actual disciples going there and stealing the body. I would say, like, what's more likely? These guys that were very afraid.
I was fact-checking you, sorry.
Okay.
It was 2 Roman soldiers
All
at
right,
the
nice.
When you said 2, and I thought to myself, was it 2 or is there more? So I wanted to double check, but you're right. 2 is correct. You did great.
That's good. Thanks.
You did good, yeah.
So they fled, right? They went home. They went back to
Yes.
fishing, and
Yep.
and they even denied Christ when people asked him if
Some
they
of 'em,
knew
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And they were scared. I mean, if you admitted you were following
Yep.
this guy or friends with him, or you were going to get executed too.
Any kind of association, yeah. So I mean, it's like,
They're kind of cowardly, weren't
yeah,
they?
you're following this guy for 3 years or so, and all of a sudden it's like your leader is dead. Like, what do? It's like, if it's me, I'm running away too. I'm trying to lay low and get out of the sight of the Romans.
So that what we saw of their character that we know is that they fled, they were scared, they were being cowards at that time.
Yep.
So is it likely that they would even want to come back, fight off some Roman soldiers and move a giant boulder and steal a body when they were that afraid anyway, if they could even pull that off, which I don't think is even likely.
Right.
But then after Jesus appears to them, now, how would you feel? Would you go die for something that you don't believe, that you don't even think is true?
Right.
So, people pretty much agree that they thought they saw Jesus, because otherwise they would not have had the courage to come back and start sharing what they saw.
100% convinced that Jesus was resurrected, right? And that they had
they were convinced,
interactions
and I
with him.
think people are convinced that they believed that at least.
Yep. I mean, when they came back, we see that, right? The whole book of Acts is all about them coming and giving their testimony and sharing about Jesus' redemption, and that's the start of the church that we know today. 2,000 years later, is all because of this movement that started. And why would you start that movement unless you were 100% sure? Because we know that 11 out of the 12 major disciples were ultimately killed for their beliefs, and John was the only one who wasn't killed, and he was exiled to an island to live the rest of his life all on his own. So, why would you put yourself through something like that unless you knew that it was true?
And if they were making this up, let's say we think that they believed it for sure, but if they were just lying and making this up, why would they tell the story of a woman discovering that the tomb was empty? Who was it? Mary Magdalene was the first one there.
Yep.
And she saw that the body was gone.
Yep.
Did Jesus appear to her as well?
Jesus did appear to her. Yep. Jesus actually appeared to her before he appeared to anybody else.
Right.
Yep.
Which, if you're making this story up, let's just say, the whole thing's a story.
Yeah.
The Easter story, the resurrection story. That's an awful way at the time to create this story. Because at that time, women could not testify in court. Yep. They didn't have authority. Nobody listened to what they said. So today, you're like, that's what did she say? I'm going to believe her. But back then, they didn't. So why would they use that?
Right. They probably would have used a man if they were going to make up a story or be convinced of a story. It'd probably be Jesus appearing to them as men first before appearing to a woman.
Sure. And the other thing is, maybe they were hallucinating. Like they thought that they saw Jesus, but they were hallucinating.
Yeah, so I have heard that one as well. But the thing is that Jesus didn't only appear to the disciples. He actually appeared to lots of other people. In 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about how he appeared to 500 different witnesses all at the same time, who then came out later and reported, Jesus, I was a witness, I saw Jesus, And Paul is a great example because Paul actually made it his, earthly mission back when he was Saul to destroy the church. There's this thing happening, the church is happening. He's like, no, Jesus is not the Son of God, and so he's out executing Christians. He's on a rampage and actually doing a really good job of it. And he ends up having an encounter with Jesus as well. He's walking to Damascus. Jesus shows up. He says, Paul, Saul, why are you persecuting my church? And Paul has this complete transformation and becomes one of the most foundational pieces in the New Testament about teaching us what it means to know Jesus and follow Jesus.
This was someone who was actually murdering Christians for their faith.
Correct.
And then he became one of the best teachers.
Yeah, the most predominant Christian, ever,
Yeah. How could that happen without seeing him?
Right. Exactly.
And so we know that he appeared to the group of 500, to Saul, who became Paul, to Mary Magdalene,
To the 12 disciples.
to the 12 disciples
Yep.
when they're eating with doubting Thomas.
Yep. I mean, he's appearing all over the place, you know.
Yeah, and just so we're on the same page, there is no such thing as a group hallucination.
Right.
One person can hallucinate something.
Correct.
You can't have a group of people all see the same thing.
Right.
And not only was it like one group, it was multiple groups.
Right. And then trying to coordinate that. And why would you? Why would you coordinate something like that? It wouldn't, just to pass a story. Again, if the people fight for three things, right? It's sex, money, and power. They're not getting sex out of it. They're not getting power out of it, and they're not earning money out of it because they all ended up dead. The 12 disciples did. So there was no. What's the motivation there to tell?
To risk your life, really.
Right, to tell this story. There's no motivation there unless it's true, and that was their motivation, is because they witnessed it and it was true.
I just thought of another one, and I don't know why. It makes really no sense. Could the Romans have gotten rid of the body or put it somewhere else? But that makes no sense.
No, they wouldn't do that because, they're the ones that initiated a lot of it anyway, because, again, the Romans were all about power and control, and Jesus was disrupting their power and control. He was causing this uprising, and so they wanted to squash it. And there's no reason why they would
it's part of why he was crucified, to stop this.
They wouldn't rekindle that
uprising
flame when they're trying to put it out. It wouldn't make sense.
And if they could come up with the body, which no one has ever found the body, they would have paraded it and showed everybody,
exactly,
here's your king. He's dead.
Yeah, really,
and
if anybody
closed
found it.
for Christianity right there. And that wasn't the case.
That was not the case, yeah.
And another possibility would be he actually wasn't all the way dead when they put him in the tomb.
Sure.
So he kind of healed himself or got better and pushed the stone away, killed the guards, and wasn't all the way dead.
Right. And to discount that, we see the report of when Jesus was on the cross and the Roman soldier pierces his side, and it's water and blood comes out of him. That's part of, they didn't know that at the time. That's another kind of good, when they were writing that stuff down, they probably didn't know the medical thing that was going on inside the body. But that's part of the death process, is the splitting of your blood cells from the water that's in your body. And when that happens, it's an indicator of death, and so we know that there's reports that happened. And so to say that he wasn't dead and that somehow he just was in a coma or whatever, the facts don't add up. It doesn't make sense.
And even if he did wake up, you still gotta
push away a big rock
and fight off
take
the
care
guards.
of the soldiers. Yeah, all the things that you have to do. Yeah. And then again, his body would be there, right? So, but Jesus ascended into heaven, and so there is no body.
Right.
So, there you have it. No body.
Well, where's the follow-up? This was a quick 10-minute talk, and it's really just meant to think about this.
Sure.
And for Christians, you should know some of this.
Sure.
And for people that are interested, I really urge you to explore this deeper. And just what do you think is more likely? That it's a story or that this actually happened?
Yeah.
And think about that for yourself. And you had some references.
Yeah, there's
a
lot of really good books. Lee Strobel has written a couple of good books. One is The Case for Christ. And actually, C.S. Lewis was another guy who tried to disprove Christianity and ended up becoming a Christian because the evidence was pointing to Jesus being who he said he was.
He's actually the one that said Lord, Liar, Lunatic, right?
Right. Yep. Oh man, Josh McDowell has a good book as well. I'm missing the title off the top of my head, but there's lots of really good.
We'll put the links in the notes section.
Yeah, there's lots of really, really good information. And like you said, we're barely brushing the surface of it. You can go really deep into this stuff and look into the actual facts. You can look into Roman documents. You can look into other testimonies. Speaking about the truth of the resurrection. And so it's not, a lot of times people say, oh, you just have to believe in God because, blindly, and just trust and have faith blindly. But there is an element of faith where you're stepping out in uncertainty, but it's not completely blind either. There's a lot of truth and evidence that we can see as we look through history and look through testimony. I was listening to a podcast by Frank Turek this week, and he was talking about just the power of testimony, basically. How do we know that George Washington was president? Like, you can't scientifically prove it. We know that it happened because it's in the historical record. It was through that testimony that we believe that George Washington was the first president of the United States of America. It's the same thing, and we don't question that. Right? People aren't going, well, I don't know, maybe he wasn't. We just, right. It's the record. It's there, and we believe it. The same is true with the different records and things going on around who Jesus was and his life and his death and his resurrection. There's other evidences and other testimonies out there.
And that's what the books in the Bible are. A lot of them are different perspectives telling the same story.
That's what the Gospels are, for right. Sure. Yeah. 4 different people just telling about the life of Jesus from their own perspective.
So the Old Testament's the first half of the Bible, and that is almost predicting that Jesus is coming, that God's coming.
It's the setup, for sure.
Yeah, like prophecy of like what's going to come in the future. Mm-hmm. And then the New Testament's the Gospels, and everyone telling their accounts with Jesus.
Yes, and then the accounts of the early church and what it looks like for us to be the church. Which is what all the letters from Paul and Peter and different people are about.
So if you haven't read the Bible, you could, if you start in the Old Testament, it's tough to even get to the New Testament, and it's almost better to maybe start with the New Testament and read the Jesus story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Gospels. We actually bought a book, my wife and I, not that long ago. It's called The Jesus Story. I think it was like a GoFundMe thing. But they took all of the Gospels and put it in just like one story, one big book. But it's all the accounts kind of put together in order. It's really cool. Yeah. So nice. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. If you wanted to find the Jesus story, that's really good.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it just ties back to what makes Christianity different than the other religions, and the resurrection right there. That's so different because that's God coming to meet us.
Yeah, and it's who God is that He. His desire for relationship with us is so strong that he was willing to become human, to die in order to take on the consequence of sin for us. Like every other religion that I know of is all about, I have to be good enough, I have to do the right things, and if I fall in line by doing the right things in my lifetime, then God accepts me. Where Christianity and Jesus really flips that on its head and says, no, you can't make it on your own. I'm going to take the punishment for you. All you need to do is put your faith and trust in me, and then that's actually what saves you. We were talking a couple days ago about how good people don't get into heaven, right? It's not about me doing good works that gets me into heaven. Like, it's surrendered people. It's people who acknowledge I'm not God and Jesus is God, and I surrender to him as Lord. That's what gets you into heaven.
And I've heard people kind of say that doesn't feel fair, that somebody who's like does more good deeds or is a better person or is kinder, that they don't get in. But it's not about earning. It's not about being better than someone else. And it actually is extremely fair because we all have a sinful nature. We all have committed sin. None of us are perfect enough. Yes. We're fully perfect to be able to be around. Yeah, we're undeserving. So we're not going to get in no matter how hard you try, you're still going to mess up and screw up no matter what.
Yeah.
So how do you account for that no matter how good you are?
Right.
How can you be around a holy God?
Right.
So that's through Jesus. He took the punishment for everyone.
Yep. And that's why the resurrection is so important, is because without the resurrection, without overcoming death, then everything that Jesus said, it falls apart at that point.
It really does. If the resurrection's not true, Christianity loses its validity.
Yes.
But the other faiths don't have all the religious leaders of the different faiths. They're all dead people.
Right.
Like we have a living God.
Yes.
Jesus wants a relationship with us. where the word religion, people say to me, "Oh, you're religious," and I'm like, "Actually, I'm not religious." And they'll argue with me, "Yes, you are. You're very religious." I'm like, "No, it's a lot different. That's a whole nother podcast: relationship versus religion."
Yeah, I'm with you. I understand what you're saying.
Right.
So that's good. I don't know. Any other thoughts?
Was that 12-minute record podcast? Right
Is that what it was?
No,
Boom.
I'm just kidding.
No, it's good. This is good. This is a fun little, helpful stuff on Easter weekend. So
Yeah, and we want to wish everybody happy Easter and have fun doing the other Easter stuff too. Doing the eggs and the candy and the brunch, and just remember what it's about. And if no one's told you about the resurrection, now you know. Now you know.
That's right. Absolutely. Dive in. Go look up these resources and really dive in. And Paul in the scripture says, always be ready when someone has a question. And so, in order for us to be prepared, if someone has a question about the resurrection or about Jesus' life, we got to do some of this study and learn some of that background and the historical context and the biblical context and all of that, so that we can be prepared and ready to have those answers when people ask questions.
Awesome. He is risen.
He's risen indeed.
All right. Happy Easter, everybody. We'll see you at a regular episode next week. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe so that more people can find out about our show. Plus, you don't want to miss any future episodes with the amazing guests and topics we have lined up for you.